A shoulder rammed into his chest. "Watch yourself, old man," one of the boys sneered, shoving past as if Arthur Green were invisible. The sudden impact knocked him off his path, sending his body lurching toward the gutter. His cane slipped from his grip. Tires screeched, horns cut the air. Arthur didn't fall. His foot caught pavement just in time. His pulse pounded, not with panic, but with something sharper, quieter. The group behind him burst into laughter. One clapped another's back. A mocking strut followed. Their voices echoed like sirens, bold, careless, loud. Arthur turned his head slightly but said nothing. He stood upright, straightened his collar, and picked up his cane. Then, he walked on. Dignity wrapped around his frame like the coat on his back. He wasn't scared. He was tired. Tired of how easy disrespect came when your skin was dark and your steps slow. Around the corner, the boys regrouped behind a row of dumpsters, trading kicks at crushed cans, gassing each other up over the hit. The one who shoved Arthur reenacted it, staggering with exaggerated limbs. "That geezer looked like he'd seen a ghost," one laughed. "Man nearly got himself smoked," another added, chuckling through a sip of soda. Then, stillness. Boots struck the pavement, the kind that landed with purpose. Two towering men stepped into view, framed by the shadowed mouth of the alley. Both wore marine dress blues. One was black, broad-chested, his face carved with age and steel. The younger, light brown and silent, stood just behind his right shoulder. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. The alley shrunk around the noise. The Black Marine's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "You think you made someone small today?" No response. He stepped forward. "The man you shoved's name is Arthur Green. Look him up. 3 wars, 5 decades in uniform. He marched when they wouldn't let us drink from the same fountain. And still, he showed up to defend a country that never apologized." The boys went still. Their postures shifted. One boy muttered under his breath but didn't finish the sentence. "Respect isn't earned on TikTok," the Marine said. "It's built in the quiet, earned in blood. Men like Arthur, black men, carried this nation while it looked the other way." Silence. One tried to offer a half smile, but it broke before it reached his eyes. The Marine stepped closer. "He gave everything. You gave him a shove." The younger Marine took 2 steps forward, not threatening, just there, unshaken. The weight of legacy pressed down on the alley. Not with fists, with truth. Arthur's apartment was modest. Worn carpet, books on shelves, sunlight in quiet corners. Photos lined the wall. Sepia memories of units long buried. One shadow box displayed folded flags and silver badges, medals he never wore, because memory was heavy enough. His bones ached. His cane rested by the door. But his back remained straight. He'd only wanted a pear tart that day. A walk. A moment of peace. Instead, he got pushed like a stranger in a world he'd helped shape. But he didn't retaliate. He didn't need to. Some men don't ask for justice. They simply deserve it. "Would you mind letting a tired old soldier by?" Arthur asked, his voice sandpapered by time but still steady, still sure. The tallest among them, a lanky teen with a sideways cap and too much swagger for his years, glared at Arthur like he was something stuck to his shoe. "Old soldier?" he repeated with a smirk. "Man, how old are you? 95? 100? Snickers rippled through the group. No one moved. Arthur kept calm. He planted both feet, one hand resting on the curved head of his cane. "Just trying to reach the bakery," he said. "It's been a long walk. Would appreciate the path." "Oh, we mind," the ringleader said, drawing out the words. His tone turned sharp as glass. "This is our bench, Pops. Try the other side of the street." He stretched his legs across the sidewalk even wider, covering every inch. Another boy chimed in, barely able to hold in his laugh. "Go take your afternoon nap before you break something, Gramps." Arthur felt it then, that deep burn under his ribs. Not humiliation, not fear, discipline. The kind they used to drill into your chest before sunrise, the kind that didn't shake when provoked. No call for all that, Arthur said, voice low even. I asked for decency, that's all. Decency. The tall one stood, stepping forward until he cast a shadow across Arthur's shoes. You want respect? Maybe earn it next time, old man. You think just 'cause you got a cane and some gray hairs you get to bark orders? Arthur stood his ground, not moving an inch. That's when it happened. As Arthur tried to sidestep him, quietly, respectfully, the teen kicked out a foot, slick and fast, catching Arthur mid-step. At the same time, a shove to the shoulder sent him spiraling. Move it, fossil, he barked. Arthur's cane flew from his grip. His body pitched sideways off the curb, arms flailing to grab anything. Horns erupted. A sedan jerked into another lane, tires screaming. Arthur landed hard, but still upright, heart pounding like artillery in his ears. He didn't stay down. Despite the hit, despite the throb in his hip, he scrambled back toward the sidewalk, muscle memory guiding his limbs like it had half a lifetime ago. Eyes wide, breathing ragged, pride intact. The boys howled. Look at him go! One shouted, nearly crying with laughter. Bet he learned that little move in basic training. Bro, he was breakdancing, another added. They cracked up, slapping hands and clutching each other's shoulders like they'd just scored a win. But the people around them didn't laugh. Pedestrians had stopped, some frozen, others fuming. A woman near the curb had her hand over her mouth. Another was already stepping forward, eyes locked on Arthur, concern etched into her face. The boys noticed the looks. One muttered something under his breath, another shrugged. Then they turned, laughing softer now, and drifted into the alley like cowards slipping away from their mess. Arthur stayed where he was, bent slightly, one hand braced against a parking meter. He wasn't injured, but something had been bruised. Not his bones, not his pride. But the idea that maybe, just maybe, his time had come and gone, and no one remembered what it cost to stand tall. A woman stepped out from the bakery line, hurrying to Arthur's side. Her hands reached gently for his arm, worry etched across her face. Are you okay, sir? She asked, her voice tight with concern. Those awful boys. Are you hurt? Arthur managed a tired smile. His hip ached and his ribs still felt the jolt, but he straightened slowly. Just shaken, ma'am. Nothing broken. Thank you kindly. She helped steady him as he dusted himself off, though his fingers trembled more than he wanted her to see. It wasn't the stumble that rattled him. It was the lack of decency. He'd faced men in enemy uniforms who had more honor than what he'd seen in those boys' eyes. Arthur picked up his cane, the rubber tip scuffed from the fall. The sound of laughter still echoed faintly from down the block. It rang sharper than any wound. He turned toward the bakery, then paused. The eclair would have to wait. His appetite had disappeared. What remained was something else. Something colder, clearer. Not vengeance, not pride. Duty. He pivoted on the cane. Every joint protested. But his mind was still military sharp. He knew where those boys had gone. The alley they ducked into didn't lead anywhere useful. Just an abandoned lot behind the old shipping warehouse. A fenced-off courtyard, boxed in by brick and silence. He'd seen kids loiter there before. Hiding places always had the same shape. Arthur also remembered something else. 2 blocks away sat the Marine Corps recruiting office. A squat building with a bold flag out front. The man who ran it, Gunny Miller, was a younger Marine, lean and loud and battle-ready. But when Arthur had met him once at a VFW dinner, the man had stood to shake his hand like he was saluting a general. Arthur didn't have his personal number, but that wasn't needed. He pulled out his old flip phone. Simple, reliable, a bit like him. He opened the contacts menu, thumbed to the recruiting office line, and hit call. His fingers, unlike moments ago, were suddenly steady. Something familiar clicked into place. Resolve. The line picked up on the second ring. Marine Corps Recruiting Station, Sergeant Peterson speaking. How may I assist you? Arthur's voice was calm, low, and unmistakably clear. This is Master Gunnery Sergeant Arthur Green, retired. I need to speak with Gunnery Sergeant Miller immediately. A short silence followed. Arthur continued. This concerns a direct act of disrespect toward the Corps and an assault on a senior Marine. The incident occurred in the alley behind the old packing warehouse. Elman and 3rd. Sergeant Peterson didn't hesitate this time. His tone sharpened. Understood, Master Gunnery. Please hold. Connecting you to Gunny now. Arthur exhaled and waited. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't looking to scare anyone. But when someone disrespects the uniform, especially when it's worn by a black Marine who gave his life to a flag that didn't always stand up for him, there are calls you still have to make. Even at 90. The line clicked. Gunny Miller, came the voice on the other end, gravel rough and clipped with authority. Who's this? Arthur's voice held steady. It's Arthur Green, Master Gunnery Sergeant, retired. There was a pause, brief but sharp. Master Gunny Green, sir. Miller's tone shifted instantly, spine straight through the phone. What do you need? Arthur didn't dramatize it. He laid it out as fact. How the sidewalk had been blocked. The mockery, the shove, the push into the street, the alley the boys disappeared into. He gave times. He gave location. They laughed, Arthur finished. They shoved a Marine into traffic for amusement, and they disrespected the Corps in broad daylight. The silence that followed was cold, flat. Then Miller spoke again, voice tight as steel cable. Are you hurt, Master Gunny? Rattled, bruised maybe, but upright. Understood. Alley behind the old warehouse, corner of Elman and 3rd? That's the one. 4 or 5 of them. Teenagers. Another beat. Say no more, Miller said. His voice now held something Arthur hadn't heard in years. Not anger, discipline, laced with purpose. Stay clear of the alley. We'll handle the correction. The line disconnected. Arthur closed the phone slowly and slid it back into his jacket. He didn't move toward home just yet. Instead, he walked to a public bench across from the alley's entrance and sat down, one hand resting on his cane. His eyes stayed fixed on the street. He didn't wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, the stillness broke. Not with noise, but with movement. They came in formation. Not in combat gear, but in dress and duty uniform. Sharp lines, clean boots, pressed sleeves. Some wore crisp khaki shirts and green trousers. Others had on their daily utilities, rolled sleeves tight around forearms trained by repetition and respect. At the front, Gunny Miller. He walked like a storm coiled in a human frame. Lean, hard, eyes scanning. Behind him marched 8 more. Recruiters and poolies not yet shipped to boot camp, but moving with the hunger of those who wanted to earn the right to be led. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. They crossed the pavement fast, not running, but closing distance like a unit that knew how to clear a field. Silent. Focused. Locked in. Arthur watched them pass, his posture relaxed, but his eyes followed every step. As they reached the alley's mouth, Miller raised a hand. Without a word, the Marines fanned out. 3 on the left, 3 on the right, the younger ones in back. A quiet, precise formation, built not for violence, but for presence. It was never about retaliation. It was about principle. Arthur didn't smile, but a small breath left his chest. Not relief, acknowledgement. These boys had touched something they didn't understand. Now they were about to learn who carried that burden, and who still stood ready to defend it. 2 Marines stayed behind at the alley's edge, shoulders squared, stance wide, blocking both sides of the entrance like stone pillars. Their faces were carved in discipline, unreadable and still. Not even the most seasoned officer in a pressed city uniform could have matched their command. The others, 6 in total, followed Gunny Miller inside. Arthur remained seated across the street, his back resting against the iron bench, eyes locked on the opening. He couldn't see what unfolded within the alley, but he could hear it. First came the silence, the sudden vacuum where teenage bravado had just been. The echo of laughter vanished like breath in the cold. Then, a voice. Gunny Miller's. No shouting. No barking. Just steel-edged instruction, sharp and precise. His tone cut through the air like a drill hall on inspection day. Arthur couldn't catch the words, but he knew that cadence. It was the sound of command being restored, and it didn't let up. What followed was a sustained verbal reckoning, measured, deliberate, and exact. It was the sound of arrogance being broken down, and something heavier taking its place. Not shame, not guilt, understanding. A second voice joined Miller's. Another Marine, likely one of the senior recruiters, speaking plainly, but with gravity. Arthur imagined he was explaining more than military conduct. Probably the basics: community, dignity, history, and the difference between running your mouth and running your life off the rails. Time passed slowly. Not long. Maybe 6 minutes. But it felt longer. Like a courtroom waiting on a verdict. Then they began to emerge. One after another, the teenagers stepped into daylight. But these weren't the same boys who had strutted into that alley. Their swagger was gone, replaced with downcast eyes and shoulders drawn tight. Some stared at the ground, others glanced quickly behind as if still expecting to be pulled back. Not one of them laughed. A few looked pale. One rubbed at his eyes, another wiped his palms against his jeans, hands visibly trembling. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't run. They moved in silence, like they were leaving a funeral, not a confrontation. Arthur watched them go. Watched as the weight of consequence bent their backs. Then the Marines stepped out. Gunny Miller led them, jaw locked, expression stern. The others followed. Silent. Composed. No one smiled. But there was something in their faces. Not pride. Fulfillment. They had done their job. Miller caught sight of Arthur across the road and crossed over. When he reached the bench, he stopped sharply and came to attention. He raised a crisp salute, perfectly executed. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Green, sir," he said. "The matter's been addressed." Arthur gave a subtle nod, accepting the gesture. Miller continued. "They've now received a thorough introduction to the Corps' values: honor, courage, commitment, with a particular reminder about showing respect." He paused. "Especially to the generation that cleared the path before them." Arthur's eyes held Miller's. For a second, neither man said a word. Then Arthur reached for the edge of his cap and returned the salute. Quiet. Complete. Mission understood. Arthur rose slowly from the bench. The stiffness in his knees reminded him of his age, but his back remained straight. He lifted his right hand in return, matching Gunny Miller's salute with a steadiness that surprised even him. "Thank you, Gunny. And extend my gratitude to your men." Miller shook his head. "No thanks needed, Master Gunnery Sergeant. We look after our own, always. Disrespect to the Corps, or to those who carried it on their backs, never goes unanswered." He paused, his gaze scanning Arthur's face with quiet concern. "You sure you're all right, sir? Need a lift? Medical?" Arthur exhaled, and for the first time that day, a genuine smile softened his features. "No, son. What you just did, that was better than any doctor's visit. That was the medicine I didn't know I needed." Miller gave a tight nod and turned to his formation. "All right, Leathernecks, form up. Back to base. Well done." In unison, the Marines pivoted, boots striking pavement in perfect sync. Their departure mirrored their arrival, efficient, purposeful, grounded. The sound of discipline faded into the hum of the street, but the echo of what had happened lingered in the air. Arthur watched them go, and something inside him, something long buried under years of silence and being overlooked, shifted. It wasn't just the salute or the respect, it was the feeling of being seen again, not as a fragile old man hobbling down a sidewalk, but as a Marine, as someone who still mattered, as someone who had never stopped wearing the uniform, only folded it away. A warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the sun now climbing over the rooftops. The bakery was still open. He realized he felt hungry. Maybe he would go get that eclair after all. What happened in that alley became something of a legend over the following weeks. It wasn't broadcasted on local news. There was no video, no social media flame. But word got around fast. Neighbors started whispering about how a group of loudmouthed teens had been met with a wall of quiet power, about how they walked into a back alley with arrogance and left it looking like they'd seen ghosts. People said those boys started holding doors open after that, standing when elders entered the room, making way on sidewalks. One even signed up for community service. They didn't talk much about what happened, but they never laughed about it either. Arthur kept up his routine. Walks, library stops, Saturday morning park benches. But now, something small had changed. Every time he passed the Marine recruiting office, whichever young man was posted out front would straighten, eyes sharp, and offer a salute. Sometimes it was a recruiter, sometimes it was a poolie. Didn't matter. They all knew who he was now. And Arthur? He always returned the gesture, calm, measured. Just a nod between generations. Between those who'd carried the torch and those preparing to take it. Because the Marine Corps doesn't lose its own. Not to time. Not to age. And not to disrespect. Its ethos doesn't soften with years. It deepens. It roots itself in memory, in tradition, in code. And when one of its elders is pushed, literally or otherwise, the response is never delayed. It arrives without sirens, without headlines, but with precision, with unity, and with a message no child forgets. Some lines don't get crossed, not because of fear, but because of who's standing on the other side. Arthur Green walked the rest of the way home that day with his cane tapping softly, rhythm steady, his breath even. He'd spent decades serving a nation that didn't always serve him back. But that morning, a message was sent. Loud, clear, and unforgettable.